right, there's our snazzy music and our intro. Hello, everybody. I'm Alan Levine from Open Education Global, and I'm really excited to do another installment of this new series that I'm calling Demo Wednesdays Live. It's Wednesday, and we're doing a demo, and we're live with Paul Hibbitts. So glad that you were willing to join us for this and ditch the slides and do live demos with us. So good day, Paul. Where are you, and how's your day going so far?
Thanks, Alan, for inviting me. Always a pleasure to be with you. Today I'm joining you from Vancouver, and we actually have a bit of sun out. So we're doing pretty good for October.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about, I mean, you've been so active with this project that I followed for a while, Docsify-This. Big picture, like why, what does it do and why do you do it?
So I think the big thing for me is that Markdown is a markup language that's available on multiple platforms, multiple applications. It's very standard. It's standard that is system independent. And I love publishing with Markdown because I feel confident that when I create content with Markdown, if I need to, I can move it into different platforms and in different contexts. And so this project, Docsify-This, is my latest attempt to make Markdown publishing more accessible for a wider range of open educators, open publishers, open creators, than a lot of other tools out there, which are fantastic, which you can also move to later, but trying to make a tool to help people kind of get started in Markdown publishing.
Okay. Now, I know from experience when you say Markdown, like some people, they just get kind of fuzzy-eyed. So how do you deal with that? Because it is like fingers in the code, if you will.
Yeah, and that's true. Markdown is a markup language, so you use characters in a text file to stylize things. But, you know, a lot of people find even HTML a little bit hard to kind of work with, you know, with opening tags and closing tags and things like that. Markdown does try to make things even easier. So, for instance, let's review, Alan. How would we make a piece of text a header in Markdown? Okay, so to make a text a header in Markdown, you would simply use a number sign and then a space and then your text. And that means that text is going to be header level 1. Now, let's play a game. Let's say you want to make a header level 2. Alan, what do you think? How might we make a level header 2 in Markdown?
Not fair because I know, but if I would guess, like if one is one pound sign, I guess I'll be to put 2 pound signs, right?
I would say good for you. Yeah, so you know this is the way kind of Markdown works, is that it is a little bit of extra text in your content, but it's very manageable. You know, like for instance, if you want to make a list in Markdown, again, how would you do that in HTML? Oh dear, ordered list, unordered list, tags.
Right.
I always mess it up, Alan. I don't know about you. But with Markdown, if I want to make a list, I just put a dash, a space, and my item 1. I hit return, dash, space, item 2. Oh, I've made a list of 2 items. So it's a little bit of work, but once you start realizing like the basics of it, you can also use it in many different places. And that actually is an important part of this whole demo session with you. The funny thing about this demo session is that using Docsify-This can almost be just a copy and paste of a URL and you're done. What's more involved actually is how does that content get created? And that's what we're going to look at today, right? We're going to look at how to create some simple content on some well-known Git services like GitHub and Codeberg, and don't want to scare anybody with Git. It's not complicated to use at a basic level, but it allows you to version track your documents. It allows you to have open collaboration with others. Again, it's a transferable skill, not specific to Docsify-This, which is another kind of main principle of mine, is that the less you have to learn about a specific non-transferable skill, the better. And so today we're going to talk about Markdown, one of the most widely used formats on the web and the internet. We're going to talk about Git services like GitHub and Codeberg, some of the most widely used collaboration platforms for open content and also software. And of course, we're going to sneak in Docsify-This as a way to turn that Markdown into web pages.
All right, so let's do some demoing. You want to start with a simple demo, or do you want to show like what you can do?
Sure. Why don't I'll bring up my a little demo launch pad. So can you see, Alan, some screen previews of some examples?
Yep. I got
Perfect.
screens up there.
So why don't we just start at the beginning? I'm just going to close a few things here, and let's just bring up Docsify-This, because just want to make sure everybody can kind of get a good idea of what Docsify-This is. So Docsify-This is an open source project, and it basically allows you to turn a Markdown file into a web page. So for instance, you can go to Docsify-This.net, and there's a public free instance for you to use. And in this web app, you basically supply the URL of an online Markdown file, and magically, using the awesome document site generator Docsify in the back end, it will create a web page. So is this really happening? Let's make sure this is really happening.
Yeah.
So in the Markdown file URL, you can see there's a little example there. I'm going to copy that URL, and I'm going to open up a new tab. You let me know if you can see this, Alan.
Yep.
And I'm going to view where that Markdown file lives. So look at this. This is a Markdown file on GitHub. It's a public file. We'll also be looking at CodeBird, but same idea works. And sure enough, this is a Markdown file on GitHub, and we can see that it has lots of formatting in Markdown. Oh, hey, including our friend header 1 heading with 1 hash mark. And as you said, Alan, header 2, 2 hash marks. Okay, so I've got this content here, and I want to turn it into a web page. There are lots of ways to do this out there, for sure. Right?
Can we just see what it looks like in the raw? Like if you go to the edit?
Oh, cool idea. Sure. So let's click raw, and here is that raw Markdown file.
Yeah.
So indeed, this is a Markdown file. It's all text, system transferable in the independent format of Markdown.
Right.
And this is what we have to work with. And of course, there's lots of site builder applications out there like Hugo and Jekyll, and these are all awesome applications, by the way, but they're a little bit involved to get going. What we want to do with Docsify-This is provide the easiest way out there, and I think it might just be the easiest way out there to go from this Markdown file to a responsive standalone web page. So let's take this just so everyone sees exactly what's going on. I'm going to copy that actual URL in GitHub. I'm going to go over here and paste it into my Markdown file URL and tap this one button, Publish as a Web Page. And here we are.
There it is.
We have a web page. And you'll notice that this web page is a Docsify-This.net URL. I can share that URL with other people. I can even make it use it as an iframe source URL. But the real power of Docsify-This is that not only does it change a Markdown file into a web page, but you can stylize that web page. So for instance, I could choose to add a sidebar, republish the page, and now I have an automatic navigational sidebar that you can provide your audience, right? And in fact, we can do a lot more things. For instance, we can, use different fonts, link colors. We can change some text on the page. We can even change, this is quite handy, changing the maximum level of headers in the sidebar. So if I said to include level 3 headers, publish as a web page, now look at this. When I go to introduction, it's nicely provided all these subtopics as they are in the document, semantically constructed Markdown using header levels. That's how this magic happens with the sidebar. So as you can see, once you provide it with this Markdown file, you can independently stylize that page, like I said, with fonts, colors, headings. There's even some advanced features that you can customize and create your own sidebars. And we won't go into that today, right? We don't want to overload everybody, but you can see that you can actually do a surprising amount with this little point and click web builder just from that one Markdown file.
So if you can get Markdown available on the web somewhere, anywhere. It could be on GitHub. It could just be sitting on a web server, right?
Yeah.
And then basically through Docsify-This, you get this web page that has these additional features, and it takes away all the GitHub stuff around it that just gives you the web page, right?
Exactly. And that web page also is responsive, so it's mobile device friendly, and you can stylize it. And the really interesting thing again is this is a unique to Docsify-This, is that your content remains where you have full control of it. At no point are you uploading your content to another server to then be, transformed into HTML. It does it all in the browser. So wherever your content is on GitHub, Codeberg, or your own web server, your content stays there. But Docsify-This magically transforms it in the browser using Docsify as the backend into a web page.
Yeah, and from what I've seen, it's fast. You don't even notify. It's not like it's taking time to render.
Yeah, it is amazingly fast. The project Docsify itself is amazing, and the work that all the contributors have done in that project is really great.
So what kind of things might people do with this kind of publishing platform?
Well, you can turn Markdown files into a lot of different things with Docsify-This. Here's a little example page. So I'll give you a couple of quick examples, and then we can kind of see, can we actually make a Markdown file ourselves and see if we can present it in Docsify-This.
Yeah.
So to give you an idea of what you can do, for instance, you can create a multi-page website. This is a course site for my past course at SFU, where I have on the sidebar all my week's materials. I can go into week 3. I can view my materials, my embedded Google Slides, my embedded YouTube videos. You'll see on the left-hand side, it'll highlight what sections I'm on. And so for the visitor, it just looks like this is a website, but actually all it is a collection of Markdown files, where you have also like a schedule page, a topics page, readings for the course. So basically, it's a complete course. And I think, let me see if I might have a link here. No, I thought I might have a link to the raw Markdown files to show you, but you'll have to trust me. This is just a Markdown file or a collection of Markdown files. And another example is you can actually embed this content into an LMS.
Wow.
So this is a Canvas site. And this Canvas site uses Docsify-This to render Markdown files as the course content, which allows me to make pages that you could, trust me, never make in Canvas. And even if you could, the length of time it takes to modify HTML pages in Canvas can be quite lengthy. And I can do this a lot faster within just a Markdown text editor.
So this is going from Markdown sitting one place through Docsify-This and iframe embedded in Canvas with that beautiful layout.
You got it. And now I can show you, see at the bottom of this page, suggest edit for this page. If I clicked on this link, lo and behold, you will see indeed that is all rendering Markdown files. And this is the Markdown file that you were just seeing. And so if I went to the home page, you'll see, oh yeah, that looks like familiar. And indeed, that was the home page that you saw on the Canvas site.
All right. And that's like high-end Docsify-This because you're the master, right?
Right. Yeah, that's getting into something a little bit more involved. If you want to see something that's more, simple and streamlined, here's a really cool project out of A&M, Texas. They're doing, I guess I had a wrong. It's not a live demo, Alan.
That's okay.
Until something goes wrong. So we'll talk about A&M Texas later. Let's take a look at Waikato Extend, which is a open education site that was based on, I think, some was it Ontario Extend efforts?
Yeah.
And so this is it's pretty like simplified presentation of some various topics about open education. So just a simple little sidebar. You can bring up different pages. And so this would be a fairly straightforward collection of Markdown files to put together for a little site. So that's another little example.
So the interconnection of the Markdown files, because they're linked together, stays fluid as you're navigating through the different links, right?
That is correct. Yeah, and Markdown supports creating links between different Markdown files, if you will, and that'll be carried through with Docsify-This if that's present. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
So I think that's probably. What do you think? Is that a good little
Yeah,
overview of the
yeah. Let's
the
do a
app?
demo. I'm ready to go too. I'm going to do the demo with you.
Cool. Okay, that is awesome. Okay, so let's go back here to our main starting point. And Alan, if you can, whenever you're ready,
Yeah,
share this URL in the session. So that URL that you see at the top, the bit.ly OEO global dash demo, etc. URL,
yeah.
that URL will redirect you to this page. This is kind of like our main resource for this whole session. And for those of you watching live, you can open it in a tab and kind of work through things. And for those of you joining later, watching the recording, this resource will be made available for you too. And so this is, by the way, what are we looking at? Actually, I couldn't resist. I had to do this. This is a Docsify-This web page using Markdown as the source content. So this is very meta of us, isn't it?
Yeah.
For a Wednesday morning, we're being quite meta. And so this is a little collection of a step-by-step tutorial that we're going to start in just a moment that kind of will show you how to create a Markdown file on GitHub. We're going to use GitHub for the demo, but there are resources in this collection about how to do it with Coburg. If you have a Coburg account, you can use it as you want during this demo. Pretty much, I wrote the instructions to work with either.
Okay.
And if you don't have a GitHub account and you're following us live, take a moment to sign up. I'll be talking for a few minutes before I start. Otherwise, once we get there, you'll have to kind of go through it and kind of see how things are done.
Right.
Here's an example of, I talked about GitHub a lot, actually, Alan. Why don't I just quickly show Codeberg, just so you can see. So this is a link to a Markdown file on Codeberg. So Codeberg is an open source effort, and it's basically provides the same kind of Git collaboration services like GitHub.
Yeah.
And as you can see here we have a sample Markdown file on Codeberg. So I could take that URL, copy it to my clipboard, go back over here and launch Docsify-This, paste that URL, and publish as a web page. And here we are. And I've got my web page using Codeberg content. And if you don't want to use GitHub or Codeberg, as Alan mentioned, you can host this file, your Markdown, almost anywhere, like on a web server, and it will work. But if you host it on GitHub or host it on Codeberg, you can take advantage of version control. You can take advantage of possible collaboration. So there's lots of benefits to do so. So I tend to use either GitHub or Codeberg myself to do that.
All right.
Okay, so I'm going to go back here to our little guide here. And so I think probably, Alan, is this a good time we can start to kind of walk through the process of creating and hosting a Markdown file?
Yeah. And I'm going to try to keep up with you.
Okay, awesome. And you can just let me know, how I'm doing speed-wise. So let's go. Okay, so if everybody's hopefully now has a GitHub account or Codeberg account, and this URL, there's a link on this page, create and host Markdown files on GitHub or Codeberg, and you want to tap on that link. And this is going to give you a step-by-step guide, an introduction of how to make it's going to be how to make a repository, which is kind of like a collection of files on GitHub or Codeberg. And once we have a repository made, we're going to make a single Markdown file. And I'm even going to let you use content from this example to get you going, so you don't have a blank screen in front of you. And then we're going to display that content in Docsify-This. And that really will get you into the world of Markdown publishing. So that's what we're going to try to do. So as you can see on this page, if you take a moment to scan this page, this is a step-by-step process. There are going to be only 4 main steps in this process. And while I do suggest GitHub because that is the easiest one to go through, Codeberg as well is provided in these instructions, and you'd be able to do the same thing in Codeberg if you want to.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to log in or sign up to GitHub. So I'm going to click on my GitHub link myself. And by the way, all the links below this point on this page will open in a separate browser tab. So
Nice.
that way your
Yeah.
guide will remain in your browser on a tab and you can switch back and forth to it, okay? As you go through this. So I'm going to click on GitHub. And of course, it's like a cooking show here, Alan. I've logged in. So I'm already logged in. If you're following along and you're not logged in, I'll give you a moment to sign in. And so once you sign into GitHub, we'll continue. So I'll just give everybody a moment to do that.
Yeah, I'm in there. I think I jumped ahead.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to tab back to the guide, just like you would on your live computers. And step 2 here is create a new repository.
Okay.
So in the upper right-hand corner, there's a plus sign, and we'd select new repository, and then we'd give that a name, and then we'd make sure the visibility is public. So I'm going to just copy the suggested name because it's in front of me, and I'm going to go back to my GitHub tab. Upper right-hand corner, you can see the plus sign, and I can tap on that, and I can choose new repository. So you want to do that, and then it'll churn a little bit. It'll come up with this create a new repository screen. You can see about a third down the screen, it's asking and requiring a repository name. I'm going to use the suggested name, Docsify-This demo. By default, GitHub and Codeberg will make that repository public, which we want to keep. And basically, we just want to go to the bottom of the screen on both Codeberg and GitHub and choose Create Repository. With any luck, you'll see a screen like this in GitHub, and Codeberg will have something similar.
Right.
And on this screen, what we want to do is we want to click on the link creating a new file, because we're going to create a new Markdown file, and I'll give you some content for that file.
Yep.
And here we are. This is the online Markdown editor in GitHub. Now, just to let you know, you can do some amazing things with both Codeberg and GitHub on your desktop. You can actually use a program called GitHub Desktop to modify content on your laptop or computer that gets pushed up automatically to your repository on either service. But for today, we're going to keep things very simple, and we're just going to use the little online editor that's available for us in GitHub. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my guide, and I'm going to feel pretty good because we've already started step 2. And we are now going to create this new file. So it's important that this new file has the extension .md. That does stand for Markdown. Okay, so that is important to do. So I'm going to copy this markdown.md file name. I'm going to go over here to my blank file, and I'm going to paste that in for my file name. And on Codeberg, there'd be something quite similar for you to do that. So that's going to be the file name that we're going to use. Again, make sure it's .md. Awesome. Then going back to your guide, now we have some Markdown. So what I've got here is some example Markdown content that you can just copy and paste. Now, if you know Markdown, feel free to make your own Markdown content in that file. But for the demo, I myself am going to copy and paste this content. This content, by the way, is a little teaching opportunity in itself right here, because here you can see, oh, look at this content. I'm going to use some headers. I'm going to use paragraphs.
Right.
I'm going to see an example of how to make a link, lists, and even include images. So I'm going to copy that Markdown, go over to my blank Markdown file on GitHub, paste it in.
Okay.
And so here, just to show you, this is an example of a link where you have like text in square brackets and a URL in regular parentheses, I guess, Alan, would I call
Right.
them that? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
That works.
example. Here's a list where it's just using hyphens. You can even have hierarchical lists by indenting a hyphen under another item number.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an example of an ordered list, and here's an example of an embedded image.
Hmm.
So, yeah, there's a few things to learn, but again, this is not something that you'd learn just for Docsify-This. Learning Markdown is a way for you to further participate and modify content in all kinds of applications out there. And so it's a great skill to have regardless of your interest in Docsify-This.
Okay.
Now, one cool thing that I do like about GitHub that I'd love to see in Codeberg is the ability to preview your Markdown content.
Okay.
So you can actually tap on this preview tab and see your Markdown content presented and formatted. So you can see, oh, look, here's the Docsify-This link that we saw in markup. Here are the lists that we saw in markup. And here is the image that we saw in markup. So that's a pretty awesome little feature, isn't it, Alan, that GitHub gives us when we're editing Markdown files, right in the editor it provides.
Yeah, because I found an error in mine, so I just fixed it before I published it.
Awesome, right? That's excellent. Okay, so wow, we've made a repository. We've made a Markdown file with extension.md.
Mm-hmm.
We've even got some Markdown content. Now what do we do? Well, we need to save our content. And in the language of Git services on Codeberg and on GitHub, this is called a commit. When you save or commit your changes to your repository. So on both platforms, you're going to look around the screen for commit button. Here on GitHub, it's in the upper right-hand corner, and it's a nice green button, commit changes. I'm going to tap on that. It gives you a default commit message. You can write little notes yourself to kind of remember what you were doing. I'll just leave it blank, and I'll provide the default create demo.md because that's good enough for me right now. Yeah. And I'm going to commit my changes.
Okay, me too.
Awesome. So now what we have, hopefully, is a repository that you've created with one file. And that's a key thing about repositories. Repositories are kind of like folders of content to me, where you can have one Markdown file or different types of files anyway, and even multiple files. But for now, in this demo, we've got one repository, one file, demo MD. What I always suggest is when you go through this process, click on the file name in your repository just to confirm, yeah, this is it. This is the content that I've made. So how are you doing over there? Do you see your content for your Markdown file?
Yeah.
Okay, so here comes publishing Markdown.
Okay.
You want to go into your browser URL field and copy the entire URL of your Markdown file. Okay, so if you're following us along with GitHub, it'll be like github.com/ and then blah, 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 your username and your file name and all that stuff. So copy that to your clipboard. And then in you can go back to the guide if you want. There's a link to Docsify-This at the top of the guide. Or actually, sorry, on step 4 of the guide, I did provide a link.
Okay.
That's good. So because we've done this, we viewed the file, correct? We copied the file URL. We're going to go to docsify-this.net. Here it comes. Will this work? Let's see. I'm going to paste the URL from GitHub into Docsify-This and publish as a web page.
Yeah.
Mine's working. How about yours, Alan?
I got mine here. I will see if I can share my my crazy creation here.
That'd be great. Yeah, I just moved back over to the StreamYard so I can see that too.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. Oh, hang on. Oh, I have so many tabs open here. I have a little bit.
No worries.
Let's see. I will go there.
Yeah, the screen is updating.
I will.
All right, there it is.
Yeah, I went a little bit off, and I went in and edited.
Oh, awesome. That is awesome. Okay, so let's see another main benefits of using Docsify-This.
Okay,
I'm going to go back to my Docsify-This tab, and Alan, you can do the same thing if you'd like to.
sure.
And when you go back to the URL for Docsify-This, you'll see that the Markdown file URL is still there, right?
Right.
As you pasted it. And if you look, there's options for your layout.
Mhm.
I'm going to also just leave it content only for now. But then there's this checkbox. Look at this checkbox. It says include edit this page link with public GitHub or Coburg files.
Okay.
This is an opportunity to show you not only with Docsify-This can you publish Markdown files, you can invite your audience to suggest changes or propose edits to those files, or just access the raw Markdown content if it's open content to use on their own stuff. So this opens up, pardon the pun, a lot of possibilities for using this as an open publishing tool. So if you
Sure.
just select that check mark and tap on publish as a web page again and scroll down to the bottom,
Hmm.
hopefully you see an edit this page link. So did that work for you, Alan?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
good. Okay, great. And
yeah.
so if you tap on that link, magically, it will take you to the GitHub repository and the exact file that you were using Docsify-This to present. And so someone could then, if they have a GitHub account or Coburg account, they could then suggest changes to that document.
So I'd imagine when you're teaching with this is like something you ask your students to do, right? So they understand the whole editing and making changes and committing and all that. Yeah.
Exactly. And again, it all depends on your context, right? So if you're an open educator or publisher and you just want to share your content, you can use this as a way to help people locate your raw Markdown and just leave it at that. You can even change that label to say view Markdown content or view my content, source content. So you can get away from the idea of editing. But in my case, my students are computer science students. They are familiar with GitHub.
Right.
And so on certain pages, I would choose to offer that, and they could, make a suggestion if they wanted to,
Right. Right.
I think actually, Alan, what we've done is we've gone from having nothing to creating a repository, having a Markdown file, copying that URL over, and publishing it with Docsify-This. And so now, of course, if you go back to your Docsify-This page, you can tap on that show more page appearance options. And again, you can use, like, for instance, I'm going to just change my font to Merriweather. I'm going to make my heading semi-bold. Oh, I'm going to enable zoomable images.
Oh,
So
wow.
someone can zoom in on Saturn. That would be pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
So let's enable that. And I'm just going to publish as a web page just to show you that now you can see, oh, it's really changed the whole feeling of that page, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Going into a serif font with bolder headings. And if I now tap on Saturn, I'll zoom in on that picture so I can read the labels more. And so how is this happening? How are we now changing a Markdown file that's on GitHub without changing the file? We're changing how it looks. So what Docsify-This actually does is, as you choose your options, it creates a series of what are called URL parameters. These are parameters that go along with the Docsify-This URL when sharing this web page that then stylize that content. So this is really truly separating content from stylization, right? From presentation. So lots of interesting things can happen because of this approach. For instance, you can actually have the same content appear differently when it's of benefit to you. If you're embedding this content in an LMS, for instance, you could change the font and link colors to perfectly match the same font and link colors the LMS uses, so your users would never even think that this content is coming from somewhere else.
Right.
However, if you're presenting this content as a standalone web page, maybe you want to stylize it in a very different manner. So if we go over to our tab with the Merriweather font and the zoomable images, and we click on this, I've got a little extension installed in Firefox that lets me zoom, that URL.
Okay.
Here is that URL. Can you see that on the screen share?
There's a lot. Yeah.
So let's take a little bit of a tour with this URL. First part is here's the Docsify-This.net web app that we're using. Okay, so that's where this is coming from. What's after that? Then our first parameter, our first item that's passed is where the Markdown file lives. So in this case, the Markdown file on our GitHub repository is being rendered. Then the current page, home page, is provided, which is, look, demo.md. Do you remember? That's actually the suggested name I gave everybody. And so that's the file name. Okay, let's keep going. Do you feel like a detective here? It's kind of like you look at this URL and can you tell what happens? Okay, look at this next parameter. Edit link equals that. So what that does is Docsify-This will automatically generate for you the URL to go back to your source content. And because it's passed in this edit link parameter, it knows to make that little link at the bottom of the page. Oh, cool. Okay. We keep going. Font family. What does that do? That sets the font that we're going to use to Merriweather. And if that wasn't available, there's some backup fonts. We've got then header weight of 600, which is like semi-bold. And we've got zoom images is true. You don't need to know any of this stuff if you don't want to know it, because Docsify-This will automatically do all this work for you. But if you want to start tweaking and changing at the URL level how your Docsify-This content is presented, you can do this. So, if you were in your LMS and you were embedding this content, you wouldn't want to have to go back out to Docsify-This every time to restylize that content, right? You could actually tweak it right in the HTML editor of whatever platform you're using. So you can kind of approach it two different ways.
Hopefully, yeah, I get that. I love reading URLs, but that's so what makes it that flexible that you can do it completely through the Docsify-This site. You can manually edit it. And also the thing I was thinking about is, like you said, same content, same gets presented in different ways depending how you need it presented. And, that's pretty flexible for an open publishing platform.
Yes, and indeed. Yeah. And being able to change the context of use as well, because the same content I've seen a few folks use as a separate entity, like a website that users can access, while at the same time using that same content in iframes and embedding it into other platforms, all with no programming, right? All with just point and click basically and editing, a few little parameters, or not. You could build it totally with just the Docsify-This, web page builder. Yeah. Wow. So I think we've actually gone through our goal of today was to show everybody how to create and host Markdown content with Docsify-This using Coburg and GitHub. And if one more thing, Alan, for anyone who has gotten this far, congratulations, first of all. Thanks for bearing with us. One thing the last thing I'd like to show is, if I can share my screen again, is if everyone goes back to that original URL that Alan shared at the beginning, the quick start to Markdown publishing, on this page is, again, you can see some more examples of Markdown files. And look, some of the things we actually did in today's session, adding and edit this page link, using a font, making zoomable images. And if you go back to the create and host Markdown files guide and scroll down for everyone's later use, Docsify-This also is something that you can use existing Markdown templates with. So, instead of creating something completely from scratch, you can use Codeberg or GitHub to actually copy a template. And there are many templates available. I've got like, I think 5 here. There's a few more kind of also on the main Docsify-This webpage, but these are the 5 main templates to kind of help you get going. So
Right.
Alan, would we have just maybe a minute or two, and I might show how to do that for everybody?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
you're in charge.
Okay, so thank you. That sounds great. So for instance, I showed earlier, I think, this multiple page course site.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to bring it up. Remember? Yeah, it was like a variation of this site, right? This is like this is a template that you can copy on GitHub and then populate with your own course website content. So you don't have to like start from scratch, right? I mean, that would be kind of, rough on anybody, right? To start from scratch. So I'll briefly show how you can use that template. And this will kind of be our ending spot, I think, for this tutorial. And so this is the template that's available for Docsify-This, the multiple page course site. And let's say you go, you know what, I like the look at this. I just want to put my own course content in there. How can I use this template? Well, literally in the upper right-hand corner, once you log into GitHub, you'll see a button called Use This Template.
Okay.
And if you tap on that button and create a new repository, instead of creating a blank repository, like if you remember what we just did in our demo, it will copy all the files that are in that original repository into your own. So I'm going to say my new course. Great, it's available, that name. Okay, so I'm going to say my new course, and I'm going to say create repository. So now GitHub is copying all those files for me in my own repository. And because it's in my own repository, I can make edits. I can change it to my own content. So for instance, let's be really brave here. I'm going to go right in. I'm just going to do a quick test, Alan. I'm going to look at my home page. I'm going to copy that URL. Okay. I'm going to go over and open up Docsify-This. I'm going to paste that URL, and do I get a web page? Okay, beautiful. I get a web page, right? So let's go a bit further. I'm going to go back into that new repository. I'm going to make an edit. I just want to show like that, in fact, this is all live. So I'm just adding hello to my own course site. I'm going to commit that change. And to use this course site fully, we'd also want to use a custom sidebar. I'm just going to enable that option there. This is explained in the template, but I'm just going to breeze through this and just enable it just as a final demo here, Alan. Navbar, publish as web page.
That's where the navbar comes from.
Yes. And so, you can go to the advanced section and enable your changes. And this actually is an excellent live demo because, hold it, I don't see the change. And that's correct. With both Codeberg and GitHub, when you commit a change, sometimes it might take a little bit of time to actually appear online in the raw Markdown.
Right.
And so this is what may happen. Actually, what is happening here is that not quite yet, right? But hopefully now, because I'm babbling on for another minute, I'm going to try to refresh this page. Oh, it's still thinking. So what I do, I just want to make sure I do this correctly. So here's my home MD page. There is my hello text. I'm just going to make sure I did that right. I'm going to do it again. And it's just going to take a little bit of time. So, but that's okay. But anyway, that was the last thing I was hoping to show, is that in this walkthrough, you were able to create your own Markdown file, and you're able to see that go live. But also on the main Docsify-This web app page, there's a whole bunch of templates like what I'm trying to show now, where some sample content is, where it'll just help you kind of get there quicker than starting from scratch, right? Because that's quite a long process.
No, that's quite beneficial to have those templates, and then you can actually see how the stuff is put together as well.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly correct. So it's a great learning opportunity. And again, you keep things as simple as what works for you, right? So you can
Right.
there's also a template that puts a whole course on one single page.
Hmm.
Because maybe that's all you need. Maybe you've got like 4 weeks or 8 weeks of material, no supplemental pages. Sure, just one single page can do it. Or if you've got like a fully loaded course of 13 weeks, then maybe it's something with you have something for a longer period of time with more content. You can use a multiple page site. So there's lots of choices there. There's even a template with example pages to embed into an LMS. So
Hmm.
that would work as well.
Well, thanks. This has been great. I think you gave people a good way to at least start and do the practice. Like I was able to do that pretty easily to get a taste and then show some of the advanced capabilities. Like, uh, where do you hear from the ways people are using Docsify-This?
Oh, so it's interesting. Slowly, the project gets a little bit more out there, a little bit more traction. I mean, the Texas A&M folks using it
Mhm.
for their open robotics page was pretty
Nice.
amazing to see.
Yeah.
I've seen the course used as straight, like a course website. I've seen it used in actually, interestingly, an open publishing course
Hmm.
in Canvas, where the instructor was using Docsify-This content within it. And of course, Alan, I have to think of your own WordPress themes that you've been starting to use Docsify-This with to include documentation in WordPress, which is pretty
Yeah.
cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah. That worked out very well for the embed instead of having to manually update the source every time. I could do it in one place. Yeah, it was ideal for that. It's still, I realize, and except it's a lot to get your head around, but once you see the beauty of it, like a single source for the
Mhm.
content that can be published many places, that's what you want in this kind of publishing platform.
Yeah, yeah. And then once you get going, the way I look at it too is that Docsify-This is not designed to be a complete end-all Markdown publishing tool.
Yeah.
It's designed, it has a couple of unique attributes, right? I mean, it's first providing a low friction way to get going, like to get Markdown turned into web pages. It's
Hmm.
still one of the easiest ways I've seen to do that. And then beyond that, it has lots of unique attributes like the URL parameters. You can stylize content, embed it in different formats. But then, you know what? Down the line, you may find, I want to do more complex customization that I can't do with Docsify-This. You are then in the spot where all your content is in individual Markdown files. You
Hmm.
can fairly easily move over to a more complex publishing tool. You
Right.
know, um, the same can't be said by a lot of other CMSs, right? A lot of other CMSs and publishing tools. Once you've got your content in there, to move to another one, it's not an easy matter. But Docsify-This never moves your original Markdown files. It keeps them where you had them originally stored. You can even do crazy things like
Hmm.
if you have a Hugo site and your Markdown content is straight Markdown, you can use Docsify-This to render portions of your Hugo or Jekyll site in other contexts,
Now you're
right?
making my head spin.
Because it's just Markdown files, and Docsify-This does not require you to move them.
Right.
And so you can do some pretty interesting things with that. One of my favorite CMSs is Grav.
Hmm.
Grav is a PHP-based CMS that uses Markdown as its content. Actually, I have earlier projects with Grav,
Right.
but that's an example where it's a fairly seamless move. If you wanted to go from something like Docsify-This to something with more customization, literally you could copy and paste Markdown files over to Grav and start on then further customizing the site.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't, platform lock-in. I guess that would be the thing. It's not that. it's the opposite. It's where your content is under your control and you can move it anywhere you want to. And Docsify-This can kind of render it from where it's at.
That's very fluid. And again, I hope people can go back through this and try this at their own paces. You've set up your wonderful collection again of step by step. Like this is very easy to follow to get a hold of the basics. Um, And again, I really thank you, Paul, for taking the time to do this, and hopefully we'll get some people trying Docsify-This.
Thank you.
What fuels your energy for this? Like you're so active with this. I see your updates a lot. Like what motivates you, and what's next?
I am really a supporter and advocate for open education and open publishing. And, with my earlier graph projects, I was trying to get a way to help people kind of get into that a bit.
Hmm.
But really, it's been with Docsify-This, I think I've come up with an approach that helps a lot more people, if Markdown is of interest to them, to kind of get going. And that fuels me, like that possibility of being able to help people kind of get into open education content or get into open publishing. That's amazing to try to help with that. And so that keeps me going. And also just seeing the different ways people are using this little tiny tool. Like, it's a very small, lightweight Markdown publishing tool, but it's kind of surprising what you can do with it using just Markdown. And so that's kind of really energizing to see people use to do that. And what's next? I think right now there's a lot of evolution that I'm working on with Docsify-This itself, trying to provide some more enhancements to it. The great maintainer team at Docsify, there's a version 5 of Docsify in the works, and I'm working on some early releases to try to get that going as well, and for the next version of Docsify-This, perhaps using that engine, which has some under the hood benefits for sure. So that's exciting to see. And also Grav, they're working on the first betas of version 1.8. And so I'm kind of working with them and testing, seeing how my projects work with that. So, open education, open publishing, really, I just love that whole effort. And if there's anything I can do to help that along, that's amazing to do.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that you're building this on top of the Docsify open library, and so that's again what makes open source so powerful.
Yeah, no, very true, right? Because that project is a significant open source project. It's got like maybe 24,000 stars on GitHub so far. And kudos to Ben Shaw, Bo Shaw. Actually posted an issue in the Docsify GitHub repository suggesting the support of remotely rendering Markdown files. And when I saw that issue, it was just clicked to me. It's just like, all my work with Markdown, open education and publishing, can I imagine being able to have people turn their Markdown files into web pages without ever installing a website, setting up an instance of Docsify? Anyway, that was a real light bulb moment when I saw Bo Shaw's GitHub issue, and here we are. And that's been a pretty amazing trip to kind of go through.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you again, Paul. You definitely lived up to my idea for Demo Wednesdays to be all demos and no slide decks. And we went through a lot of things, and we gave people some takeaways. So I really appreciate that you've done this for us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alan. It's been a pleasure.
All right. So we'll go out with our little outro again. You'll find the links to this in the chat, and as well from Docsify-This.net, which I've been flashing on the screen a lot. Easy to find, as well as Paul. Check out his site at hibbittsdesign.org, and stay tuned next week. I think I have a double header of demos. So we're seeing how this format plays out. So again, thanks, Paul.
Okay, thank you.